The dim blue lights of the research vessel's stellar horizon pulsed softly as Lyra moved through the quiet corridor. Her six-fingered hand brushed against the smooth metal wall, while her large violet eyes adjusted to the low light. Like all members of the Novan species, Lyra stood tall and slender, her skin a pale blue that seemed to shimmer under the ship's lights. Log entry 247, day 85 on research mission. Lyra spoke into her wrist device. The team continues to catalog species from the outer rim. Nothing remarkable to report. The young researcher sighed. 3 cycles of training at the Galactic Academy had earned her this position, yet the excitement she had anticipated remained elusive. The universe, it seemed, held fewer surprises than her professors had promised. Little did she know that this ordinary day would change everything she believed about the cosmos and her place in it. Lyra turned toward the specimen bay, a large chamber where the team stored samples from various planets. Her task for the day was simple: check on the latest collection of plant specimens from planet TR7. Professor Mech would expect her report by evening meal. The doors slid open with a soft hiss. Lyra stepped inside, then froze. Something was moving among the specimen containers. Something that shouldn't be there. "Hello?" Her voice quivered slightly. "Is anyone there? This area is restricted to research personnel only." A crash answered her, followed by a strange sound, not the musical tones of Novan speech nor the clicking language of the ship's Vereen engineers. This sound was rough, sharp, and entirely unfamiliar. "Who's there?" Lyra called again, reaching for the emergency communicator on her belt. A figure emerged from behind the tall storage units. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The creature stood shorter than her but somehow seemed more solid, more present. It had only 2 arms instead of the standard 4 among civilized species. Its skin wasn't luminescent or scaled but a flat, dull color that reminded Lyra of the soil on her home world. Most unsettling were its eyes, small, with round pupils that fixed on her with an intensity that made her step back. "Stay where you are," Lyra said, though she knew the creature probably couldn't understand her. Universal translators worked only for known species in the galactic database. The being held up its hands, palms forward. A universal gesture of peace? Lyra wasn't sure. Then it spoke again, those strange sounds tumbling out in what seemed like a pattern. I don't understand you," Lyra said, keeping her distance. "Are you a stowaway? How did you get aboard?" The creature pointed to itself and made a simple sound. "Ben." Was that its designation? Its name? Lyra hesitated, then pointed to herself. "Lyra." The creature, Ben, nodded vigorously, then repeated, "Lyra," in a strange accent that made her name sound new and different. Curiosity began to replace Lyra's fear. The being seemed intelligent, possibly even sentient. And if it was communicating, it might not pose an immediate threat. Still, protocol demanded she report the intruder. As she reached again for her communicator, Ben's expression changed. Even across species, Lyra recognized fear. The creature lunged forward, not toward her but toward the exit. Instinctively, Lyra moved to block its path. They collided. The contact sent an unexpected shock through Lyra's system, not painful, but startling. The being was warm, much warmer than Novan's. And there was something else, a strange energy she couldn't identify. Ben stumbled backward, looking as surprised as she felt. Then, to Lyra's astonishment, its face changed again. The corners of its mouth curved upward, exposing blunt white teeth. Was this aggression? A threat display? But something told Lyra it wasn't. The creature's posture remained non-threatening. "What are you?" she whispered. Before either could make another move, the specimen bay doors opened again. Professor Mech entered, his 4 arms carrying data tablets. He stopped abruptly. "Lyra! Get away from it!" he shouted. "Security to Specimen Bay 3! Now!" "Professor, wait!" Lyra began, but Mech was already hitting the emergency lockdown button. Alarm lights flashed red as security barriers dropped into place. Ben looked frantically around the room, then at Lyra. There was intelligence in those strange eyes, and something that transcended language, a plea for help. In that moment, Lyra made a decision that would change her life forever. She pointed to a small storage closet near the back wall. "Hide," she said, gesturing urgently. As security forces rushed in, Lyra stood facing Professor Mech, her mind racing with questions. What was this creature? Where had it come from? And why, despite all her training about caution with unknown species, had she just helped it hide? One thing was certain: her routine research mission had just become far more interesting than she could have imagined. The security team left after an hour of searching the specimen bay. They found nothing, despite their thorough inspection of every corner and container. Professor Mech remained suspicious. "Are you certain of what you saw, Lyra?" he asked, his tall frame looming over her. "Perhaps it was just a shadow from the equipment." "I'm certain I saw something, Professor," Lyra replied carefully. She wasn't used to lying, and the words felt strange in her mouth. "But perhaps it was merely a malfunction in one of the specimen containers. The movement could have triggered my alarm." Professor Mech studied her for a long moment. His extra set of eyes, the smaller pair located near his temples, narrowed slightly. Novans couldn't hide their emotions completely. Their secondary eyes often revealed their true feelings. "Very well. But report anything unusual immediately. The specimens we carry are valuable to the Academy." After the professor left, Lyra waited until the corridor outside was empty before approaching the storage closet. "They're gone," she whispered, opening the door. "You can come out now." Ben emerged cautiously, looking around with those strange small eyes. Now, in the full light, Lyra could study him properly. He wore some kind of fitted garment that covered most of his body, unlike the flowing robes preferred by Novans. His hair was short and dark, growing only on the top of his head. Most fascinating were his hands, just 5 fingers, but they looked strong and capable. "I should report you," Lyra said, knowing he couldn't understand. "But I want to know more first. What are you? Where did you come from?" Ben pointed upward, then made a sweeping gesture that Lyra interpreted as meaning space or stars. Then he pointed to himself and said another word, slowly and clearly. "Human." "Human," Lyra repeated. The word felt odd in her mouth. "Is that your species?" Ben nodded enthusiastically. He pointed to his chest again. "Ben. Human." Then he pointed to her. "Lyra. Not human." Lyra couldn't help the sound that escaped her, a light, musical laugh. The creature, the human, was trying to communicate. And succeeding, in a basic way. She made a quick decision. Her private research pod would be safer than the specimen bay. Someone could walk in at any moment. "Follow me," she said, gesturing toward the door. Quietly. Ben understood the gesture if not the words. He moved with surprising stealth for a creature of his solid build. Lyra checked the corridor, then led him through a series of less-used passages to her personal quarters. Once inside, she activated the privacy shield. Standard for researchers who needed to concentrate without interruption, the shield would prevent casual visitors. Anyone seeking entry would have to announce themselves first. Ben walked around the small room, examining everything with obvious curiosity. He touched her holographic plants, jerking back in surprise when his hand passed through them. Lyra smiled at his reaction. From her desk, she retrieved a basic translation device. It wasn't designed for completely unknown languages, but perhaps it could establish some patterns. "Talk," she instructed Ben, holding up the device. "Speak words." Ben looked at the device, then at her. Understanding dawned on his face. He began to speak in his language, a stream of those strange sounds that somehow seemed to have structure and rhythm. The device hummed, processing the input. After a minute, it flashed red. Insufficient data for translation, it displayed. Lyra sighed. This would take time. She tried a different approach, pointing to common objects and naming them, then encouraging Ben to do the same. "Light," she said, pointing to the ceiling illumination. "Light." Ben repeated in her language, then said something that sounded like late in his own. They continued this basic exchange with several objects. Ben learned quickly, Lyra noticed. Perhaps too quickly for a simple creature. His eyes missed nothing, and he seemed to be analyzing her and the room as much as she was studying him. When she offered him water, his reaction puzzled her. He sniffed it first, then looked at her as if waiting. When she took a sip from her own cup to demonstrate, he nodded and drank as well. Why would he be so cautious about water? Did humans have enemies who poisoned them? The thought was disturbing. As the ship's cycle moved toward rest period, Lyra faced a dilemma. She couldn't keep the human hidden in her quarters indefinitely. Sooner or later, someone would discover him. And yet, something told her that turning him in immediately would be a mistake. Ben seemed to sense her conflict. He sat on the floor, looking up at her with those strange, expressive eyes. Then he reached into his garment and pulled out a small object. He held it out to her, a gesture that needed no translation. A gift. An offering of trust. Lyra hesitated, then extended her hand to accept whatever connection this strange human was offering. The object Ben placed in Lyra's palm was small and metallic. It unfolded at her touch, revealing a series of tiny images that glowed with soft light. Lyra gasped as the images shifted, showing stars, planets, and what she assumed was Ben's home world, a blue and green sphere unlike any in the Novan database. "Is this where you come from?" she asked, pointing to the blue planet. Ben nodded, then pressed a small button on the device. The image zoomed in to show structures, buildings perhaps, and other humans moving about their daily lives. Their appearances varied more than Lyra expected, different colors of skin, hair, and clothing. Such variation within a single species was unusual. The study session was interrupted by a sudden lurch of the ship. Lyra stumbled, catching herself against the wall as the lights flickered. The emergency signal pulsed, 3 short bursts, indicating a technical malfunction rather than an attack. "Stay here," she told Ben, making a staying motion with her hand. "I need to check what's happening." She stepped into the corridor, where crew members rushed toward the engine section. Following them, she found Professor Mech and the ship's engineer, Drav, hunched over a control panel. "What's happened?" Lyra asked. Drav, his scaled skin reflecting the emergency lights, looked up with concern. "The main cooling system for the specimen containment has failed. If we don't fix it within 2 hours, we'll lose all the biological samples." "Can't we just reroute power from non-essential systems?" Lyra suggested. "We've tried," Professor Mech said. "There's physical damage to the coolant distribution matrix. Someone needs to climb into the maintenance shaft and repair it manually." "The shaft is too narrow for most of us," Drav added, gesturing to his broad frame. "And the few crew members small enough lack the technical knowledge needed." Lyra bit her lip. Ben was smaller than most of the crew. And something about the way he had examined her quarters suggested intelligence and problem-solving abilities. But revealing him would mean explaining why she had hidden him in the first place. Before she could decide, alarms blared more urgently. The ship's computer announced, "Warning, critical failure in specimen containment imminent. 43% of samples already compromised." Professor Mech looked devastated. "A year's worth of research lost." Lyra made her decision. "I might have a solution. Wait here." She hurried back to her quarters where Ben sat exactly where she'd left him, though his posture suggested alertness to the alarms. "I need your help," she said, pantomiming a plea. "Come." Ben followed without hesitation. Lyra led him to the engine room, where Professor Mech and Drav turned in shock at their arrival. "What is this creature?" Mech demanded. "Where did it come from?" "He's called a human," Lyra explained quickly. "He was in the specimen bay earlier, that's what I saw. I've been studying him. He's intelligent and smaller than us. He might be able to reach the cooling system. This is a serious breach of protocol," Mech began, but Drav interrupted. "We don't have time for protocols. The samples are dying." The engineer turned to Ben and pointed to the narrow maintenance shaft, then to the damaged cooling unit visible through a small window. Ben studied the situation, then nodded. He examined the tools Drav offered, selecting several with confidence that suggested familiarity with mechanical work. Without prompting, he removed his outer garment to move more freely and climbed into the maintenance shaft. Remarkable flexibility, Drav noted as Ben navigated the tight space with ease. They watched through the monitoring system as Ben reached the damaged component. He studied it briefly, then began working with surprising efficiency. His smaller hands moved delicately among the ship's systems, reconnecting broken connections and bypassing damaged sections. "Is he actually understanding the technology?" Professor Mech asked, disbelief clear in his voice. "I think he's figuring it out as he goes," Lyra replied, watching Ben test connections before finalizing them. "He observes, experiments, adapts." Within 20 minutes, the cooling system hummed back to life. The temperature readings for the specimen bay stabilized, then began dropping to safe levels. Ben emerged from the shaft, his face streaked with dirt but wearing what Lyra now recognized as a smile. "The human fixed it," Drav said, checking the systems. "Completely repaired, not just a temporary solution." Professor Mech looked from the functional systems to Ben with new interest. "Perhaps your decision to study this creature rather than report it wasn't entirely misguided, Lyra." Lyra translated the professor's statement for Ben using simple gestures. The human's response was another smile and a strange movement. He extended his hand toward Professor Mech. "I believe," Lyra said, remembering her observations, "this is how humans show respect and agreement. A gesture of peace." After a moment's hesitation, Professor Mech extended one of his 4 hands to meet Ben's. The first official handshake between their species marked a turning point that none of them could have predicted. Word spread quickly through the stellar horizon about the strange being who had saved the research specimens. The ship's captain, a stern Novan named Trill, called an emergency meeting of the senior staff. Lyra found herself in the command center alongside Professor Mech, with Ben seated beside her. The human appeared calm despite being surrounded by curious aliens. "So," Captain Trill began, her secondary eyes fixed on Ben while her primary pair addressed the room. "We have an unregistered life form aboard my ship. A life form that one of our junior researchers chose to hide rather than report." Her gaze shifted fully to Lyra, who fought the urge to look away. "I accept full responsibility, Captain," Lyra said. "At first, I was simply curious. Then, when I realized he was intelligent, I wanted to learn more before subjecting him to containment protocols." Professor Mech cleared his throat. "If I may, Captain, Lyra's unorthodox decision ultimately saved a year's worth of research. And this human has demonstrated remarkable technical abilities. That doesn't explain how he got aboard in the first place." The security chief growled from across the table. All eyes turned to Ben, who had been listening quietly. Over the past day, Lyra had worked with him on basic communication, using a mixture of gestures, simple words, and the translation device, which was slowly building a rudimentary dictionary of human language. Ben pointed to himself, then made a series of gestures that Lyra interpreted for the others. "He says his ship was damaged in an asteroid field. He managed to dock with ours during our last planetary orbit, seeking help. When no one responded to his signals, he entered through a maintenance hatch." "Impossible," the security chief scoffed. "Our systems would have detected an unauthorized docking." Ben shook his head and said something else. Lyra listened carefully. "He says his ship uses. I'm not sure of the exact translation, a technology that makes it difficult to detect. It was something developed for research in dangerous territories." Captain Trill leaned forward. "Ask him where his people come from. Why haven't we encountered humans before?" Lyra relayed the question. Ben's answer came slowly, as if he was choosing his words carefully even across the language barrier. "He says humans are from a sector we haven't explored yet. They've been observing other species but avoiding contact until their leaders decide it's safe." "Safe for whom?" someone muttered. "Both sides," Lyra translated Ben's response. He wasn't supposed to make contact yet. His mission was only to observe. The discussion continued for hours. By the end, Captain Trill had made 3 decisions. Ben would remain under observation but not confinement. He would assist with repairs since he had proven his skills, and Lyra would continue to serve as his primary liaison, responsible for teaching him their language and learning about humans in return. As they left the command center, several crew members stopped to stare at Ben. Some looked fearful, others curious. One young engineer stepped directly into their path. "Is it true?" he asked Lyra while pointing at Ben. "They say this creature repaired systems he'd never seen before." "That's not possible. No species can understand technology they haven't been taught to use." Before Lyra could respond, another researcher joined them. "I heard humans are dangerous," she said, keeping her distance. "That they destroyed half their own world before they reached space. We shouldn't trust it." "Him," Lyra corrected firmly. "Not it. And Ben has done nothing but help us since he arrived." The small crowd's murmurs grew louder until Professor Mech appeared. "Back to your stations," he ordered. "This human is officially a guest of the research team now." As the crowd dispersed, Lyra noticed Ben watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Later, in the small workspace now assigned to them both, Lyra found Ben studying Novan writing on her data tablet. He looked up as she entered. "Learn," he said in her language, pointing to the screen. Then, using a mixture of his improving Novan and gestures, he asked, "Why defend Ben? Others afraid?" The question caught Lyra off guard. Why had she defended him? At first, it had been scientific curiosity. Then gratitude for his help with the cooling system. But now? Because they judge without knowing, she replied simply. That's not how science works. We observe, we learn, then we understand. Ben's face brightened with that now familiar human smile. He pulled out his image device again and showed her something new, pictures of humans working together, building things, helping each other. Then images of stars, ships, and planets. Humans, he said in Novan, tapping the first set of images. Then he tapped the second set and added a new word. Dreams. Something shifted in Lyra's understanding. This wasn't just an interesting specimen, or even just an intelligent being. This was a person from a civilization with its own history, culture, and aspirations, dreams that perhaps weren't so different from her own. For the first time, she wondered what her world might look like through his eyes. 3 weeks had passed since Ben's discovery aboard the Stellar Horizon. The human now moved freely around the ship, though always with Lyra nearby. Their communication had improved dramatically, with Ben learning Novan at a pace that impressed even the language specialists. Lyra, in turn, had begun to grasp the basics of human speech. Today they sat in the ship's observation deck, a dome-shaped room with transparent walls that offered an unobstructed view of space. The ship had entered orbit around a gas giant whose swirling storms created beautiful patterns of amber and crimson. Your people must have seen thousands of planets like this, Lyra said, her gaze fixed on the majestic world below. Ben shook his head. No. Humans new to space. Only visited 12 systems before yours. Lyra turned to him in surprise. But your technology, the cloaking system on your ship, the way you understood our cooling mechanisms. Humans learn fast, Ben replied with a shrug. We adapt. Before she could ask more questions, her communication device chimed. Professor Mech's voice came through. Lyra, bring the human to Research Lab 3 immediately. She exchanged a concerned look with Ben. We should go. When they arrived at the lab, they found Professor Mech standing with Captain Trill and the ship's data analyst, a thin Vereen named Kip. All three looked unusually serious. We've been analyzing the information from the human's vessel, Kip began without preamble. It contains records of their space exploration, history, and biological data. And? Lyra prompted when he paused. And we've discovered something remarkable, Professor Mech said. Something that explains why humans aren't in our database despite their obvious intelligence. Captain Trill gestured to the main screen. Show them. Kip activated the display, bringing up a series of biological diagrams showing DNA structures, brain scans, and cellular images. Human biology is unlike anything in our records. Their cells regenerate at an astonishing rate. Their neural pathways form new connections continuously throughout their lives. Many species have cellular regeneration, Lyra pointed out. Not like this, Professor Mech said. Look at the adaptation markers. Lyra studied the data more carefully. What she saw made her secondary eyes widen in disbelief. This can't be right. These readings suggest humans can physiologically adapt to new environments within a single generation. Exactly, Kip confirmed. While most species evolve gradually over thousands of years, humans can adapt to new conditions within their own lifetime. Their bodies and brains literally rewire themselves in response to challenges. But that's impossible, Lyra whispered. Ben, who had been following the conversation with growing understanding, spoke up. Not impossible. Necessary. Earth, our planet, changes quickly. Many environments. Humans must adapt or die. That explains their problem-solving abilities, Professor Mech said. When Ben fixed our cooling system, he wasn't just following memorized procedures. His brain was creating new solutions in real time. Captain Trill turned to Ben with new intensity. Is this why your people have been hiding? You knew other species would find this ability concerning? Ben hesitated before answering. Leaders worry. Some humans use adaptation for wrong things. War. Control. Need to be sure all humans ready for peace before meeting others. A heavy silence filled the room. Lyra felt a chill run through her. The implications were enormous. A species that could adapt so quickly could potentially overcome any obstacle, master any technology, survive in any environment. If they were hostile. But you're not all like that, she said, looking directly at Ben. It wasn't a question. No, Ben replied simply. Many humans want only knowledge, understanding, connection. He gestured to the stars visible through the lab's small viewport. Universe big. Being alone, sad? Captain Trill studied him for a long moment. I must report this to Galactic Command. They'll want to establish official contact with your leaders. Be careful, Ben warned. Some will fear humans. May want to isolate us. And they might be right to be cautious. Kip muttered. Lyra felt a surge of protectiveness. Or they might be throwing away the greatest opportunity for advancement the galaxy has ever known. Think about it, a species that can help us solve problems we've struggled with for centuries. Medical challenges, environmental restoration, technology improvements. Professor Mech nodded slowly. The potential benefits are as significant as the potential risks. As the others continued discussing implications, Lyra moved to stand beside Ben at the viewport. In the reflection of the transparent material, she could see both of their faces, so different in appearance, yet both showing the same emotion, concern for the future. Whatever happens, she said quietly, I'll speak for your people. I'll tell them what I've seen, that humans may be the most adaptable species in the galaxy, but that doesn't make you dangerous. It makes you valuable. Ben's reflection smiled at hers. And I will tell humans about Novans. About Lyra, who saw person, not just strange creature. In that moment, looking out at the stars with a being from a world she'd never seen, Lyra understood that the universe had just become both larger and smaller simultaneously. 1 month later, the stellar horizon approached the coordinates for the official first contact between humans and the Galactic Alliance. Lyra stood on the bridge, dressed in formal Novan attire, flowing robes of shimmering blue that matched her skin. Beside her, Ben wore clothing provided by his own people, a crisp white uniform with gold symbols that marked him as a representative of Earth. Are you nervous? Lyra asked, noticing how he kept adjusting his collar. Yes, Ben admitted. First official meeting between our worlds. Important to get right. In the past month, everything had changed. After Captain Trill's report reached Galactic Command, a flurry of diplomatic communications had followed. The initial alarm about humans' adaptive abilities had gradually given way to cautious interest. Both sides had agreed to a formal meeting aboard a neutral station. The massive space station came into view, a gleaming structure shaped like a wheel with spokes extending from a central hub. Ships from various worlds hovered nearby, the distinct spiral shapes of marine vessels, the crystalline structures of the Luminid diplomats, and most notably 3 human ships that had revealed themselves from hiding. "I never imagined being part of something like this," Lyra said softly. "My research was supposed to be about plants and simple organisms, not first contact with a new sentient species." Ben smiled. "Life adapts. Like humans." The landing bay of the station was filled with representatives from a dozen worlds, all gathered to witness the historic meeting. As the crew of the Stellar Horizon disembarked, Lyra noticed how Ben straightened his posture, his expression becoming more formal. At the center of the bay stood a group of humans, 3 females and 4 males, each with different coloring and features that showcased their species' diversity. One stepped forward, an older female with silver hair and a commanding presence. "I am Ambassador Wilson of Earth," she announced in perfect galactic standard, surprising everyone. "We have been studying your languages for longer than you might think." The Galactic Alliance president, a tall luminid whose body glowed with gentle blue light, responded. "And yet you chose to remain hidden until now. We needed to understand more about ourselves before introducing ourselves to the galaxy," Ambassador Wilson replied. "Our history contains both great achievements and terrible mistakes. We wanted to be sure we had learned from those mistakes." The formal proceedings continued for hours, speeches, protocols, the signing of preliminary agreements. Through it all, Lyra watched the reactions of those around her. Some still showed fear or suspicion when looking at the humans. Others displayed open curiosity. A few, like Professor Mech, were already engaged in animated discussions with human scientists, barely able to contain their excitement at the exchange of knowledge. During a brief recess, Lyra found herself in a quiet corridor with Ben. "Your leaders speak well," she observed. "They prepared long time," Ben replied. "Wanted peace, not fear." He paused, looking at her with those expressive eyes that she'd grown to read so well. "What happens now, Lyra? After meeting?" It was the question she'd been avoiding. With official contact established, there was no reason for Ben to remain aboard the Stellar Horizon. He would return to his people, continue his work elsewhere. "You'll go back to Earth?" she asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Maybe not." He smiled. "I requested new assignment. Cultural exchange program. Need Novan expert to help humans understand your people." Lyra's secondary eyes widened in surprise and joy. "And did they approve this request?" "If Novans agree. If certain research are willing to continue working with difficult human." Before she could respond, Professor Mech approached them, looking uncharacteristically excited. "Lyra, the Galactic Science Academy has just approved a joint research initiative. Humans and Novans will work together to study adaptive biology across species. They want you to lead the Novan team, given your unique experience." Lyra's mind raced. This wasn't just an opportunity to continue her work with Ben, it was a chance to bridge 2 worlds, to help shape how these species would interact for generations to come. "When do we start?" she asked. "Immediately," Mech replied. "A research vessel is being prepared. Mixed crew, human and Novan scientists working side by side." Later, as the diplomatic reception drew to a close, Lyra stood with Ben at a viewport overlooking the glittering expanse of stars. Ships from both their worlds moved through the darkness, no longer hidden from each other. "When I first saw you in the specimen bay," Lyra said, "I was afraid. I thought you were strange, possibly dangerous." "And now?" Ben asked. "Now I know better. Your difference isn't something to fear, it's something to value." She turned to face him fully. "We can learn from each other, adapt together." Ben nodded, his smile reflecting the starlight. "That is human way. That is your way too, Lyra. Why we will succeed." As they stood together at the threshold of a new era, Lyra thought about the journal entries she had been keeping since meeting Ben. What had begun as scientific observations had become the chronicle of a historic moment, and perhaps, more importantly, the story of how two beings from different worlds had discovered that understanding could overcome fear, and that connection was possible across even the vastest distances of space. "Ready for next adventure?" Ben asked. Lyra smiled. "Always,"